Hey all, it's Ryder. I appreciate all the feedback on the previous videos and wanted to put a lot of effort into my future content to ensure the highest quality. Today's video is a continuation of my theory crafting video as I go into more depth about optimal gear choices when creating your own build. Because this video will operate as an index rather than a flow of consciousness like previous videos, if there is a particular section that you're curious about the most, skip through using the timestamps down below. All mythics will be included in a separate video, as I feel they need more time to properly discuss, rather than throwing them in with everything else. On your screen, I provided an overview of the topics covered in today's video. Before we delve into the sets, understanding the effectiveness of any set needs to be placed within the context of ESO's evolving meta. As of Update 46, subclassing allows countless combinations for potential use of many previously underutilized sets. While this is true, this expanded list of possibilities does not always equate to more effective options. Like I mentioned in my previous videos, ESO revolves around opportunity cost, and unfortunately, options are subjected to direct comparison to one another, driving the player base to come to a consensus of popular combinations. This idea creates the meta, or most common effective means to reach a desirable outcome. The release of subclassing allows players to pair the highest damaging skills together. Because the aggressive play styles will often beat out passive play styles, players are rewarded for dealing as much damage as possible more quickly. By pairing skill lines such as Aegis Spear, Animal Companions, and Assassination, PvPers have achieved historically high critical damage potential. These changes have created what's deemed as a high damage meta, but more specifically, a high crit damage meta. More than that, the new mythic, Monomyth Reforged, is an incredibly potent mythic ring that rewards this playstyle even more, furthering the appealability into creating a crit-heavy build. With this path being clearly laid out, most players are hunting this build type en masse, and you'll see it almost everywhere. In order to succeed in subclassing, you must understand the current PvP meta environment, as any choice you make when creating your own build is not only about how you will achieve your win condition, but also preventing your opponent from achieving theirs. While many players claim that a lack of particular combination of skill lines and sets is suboptimal, we have to look further at the larger picture of how the meta evolves and how this directly impacts diverse build viability. Let's examine the growing crit damage meta. A typical setup will involve Rallying Cry as their primary defensive set, and an offensive set such as Order's Wrath or Mechanical Acuity to add additional crit chance or damage, and the Monomyth to grant another 20% crit damage. The more popular these sets are, the more popular they will continue to become based on how influential the player base is on one another, but also from content creators pushing out videos explaining how powerful this combination is. This isn't to say they're wrong, and in fact, I buy into this idea heavily as seen by my videos. That said, as mentioned, people claiming those not running this combination are suboptimal aren't truly grasping the larger depth to truly optimize build diversity. Let's examine a meta from the late 2010s. Raw damage were among the most popular builds, and so to counter this, many players ran sets like Mark of the Pariah and Bloodspawn, as higher resistances were the answer to this problem. Shifting to the current day, however, player damage shifted from raw damage outputs to high crit damage, meaning the viability of resistances is greatly lessened, and builds that failed to incorporate critical resistance became less effective. The strength of defensive answers only increases as the meta becomes popular, as the more people we counter, our build is effective against more people. Now that we're seeing a gravely homogenized crit damage meta, Rallying Cry acts as a replacement to Pariah in many ways, and now almost everyone runs this set. In previous updates, builds had to be more generalized to account for a variety of builds such as high penetration, crit damage, dots, and other debuffs. Now, however, as more players use high crit damage builds, the option of equipping Rallying Cry feels less like a choice. This introduces the idea of the counter meta, or a combination of skills and sets that either ignore or directly contradict the sets run by other players. If all players are running Rallying Cry, a set that reduces incoming critical damage, what if our build were to simply ignore our own crit damage and instead opt into pure penetration or raw damage increases? Or what if we steal the high critical resistances of our enemies by using a set like Farstrider? Just like the pie charts we saw, we can increase our own effectiveness to go against the trend of players, but in a completely different direction. If most players are using Rallying Cry, new options become more viable. Last update, the one before subclassing, builds that forwent crit damage entirely by using Malacaths were somewhat effective against a portion of players, but mostly effective against those using Rallying Cry. The viability of Malacaths has grown dramatically as more players opt to use Rallying Cry to pivot against this meta. This introduces opportunities to think beyond the popular trends of the landscape and to create unexpected builds for your opponents to fight against. To summarize my aforementioned points, the more people use the meta, the stronger the counter meta is and opens up viability for off-meta picks. The final note I want to mention about approaching your build is to understand that off-meta builds are not necessarily bad or even worse than the meta. That isn't to say there aren't some clear choices about what is good and what is bad, like most builds opting to use Rallying Cry to survive against the many incoming bursts are good, but to shut out all other possibilities is simply not objective truth. Many combinations are now more viable than ever, as long as the conjunction between itself and other sets and abilities are considered. I do not believe players have found the best options available to us yet, and we should expect to see trends vary greatly over the next few weeks and especially future patches. Now that we understand the evolving crit damage meta, what the counter meta could be, and highlighting options that are off meta, we can begin to discuss set choice. We can divide monster sets into 4 categories: Burst, Dot, Sustain, and Utility. Beginning with the Burst sets, these are commonly run monster sets to enhance one's burst potential, but they all do so in different ways and cannot simply be thrown into a build without careful consideration. While most of these options work well in most cases, optimizing your build requires attention to detail as to which burst set provides the best synergy with your combo. To begin, Bloodspawn allows users to reach their ultimate faster, thus allowing a user to burst more often. On the opposite side of the coin, however, Balorg does not increase frequency of bursts, but rather its potency. The decision between the two must take several factors into consideration, such as outside penetration, frequency of damage taken, and ultimate cost to decide which is best for your build. Let's take the case of a typical range plar, for example. They have applied Major and Minor Breach through Elemental Susceptibility and a Sundering status effect from Power of the Light. While their penetration is around 8,000 or higher than their baseline, they still might desire more. In addition, the ranged plar is using Meteor, an ultimate that costs 200, and they plan to use this immediately when they can. In this case, Balorg would benefit the ranged plar more than Bloodspawn would for 2 reasons. They rely on higher burst in a shorter window, so the spell damage and penetration gain from Balorg is desired, but to compound this factor, they gain more of both of these stats based on how much ultimate was used. Because their ultimate was expensive, and more so if they wait longer, Balorg will give a high damage boost to them. Let's review another scenario. The player is a Templar, but using Onslaught as their ultimate, an ability that grants them 100% penetration. Moreover, this player likes to fight against many players at the same time, always receiving some type of incoming damage. While they would still benefit from the Balorg spell damage increase, the benefit of the increased penetration from the set would only be useful after the Onslaught burst would end, and the build wouldn't carry as much synergy. As such, Bloodspawn would be the better option for this player, as they could reach 100% penetration more often. To summarize this difference, you have to make the choice between frequency and potency between these two sets, and the choice that makes sense for you will depend on your ultimate, penetration, and damage taken. If you're unsure of which to run, try both and make this choice based on anecdotal observation. Antilmur is another option for burst, granting an activation of damage on a heavy attack. This set is often used by gankers or brawlers utilizing heavy attacks within the rotation. While the set can be strong, the rest of the setup must synergize with heavy attacking, as the burst damage from this would be staggered from other sources. Kjolnir has seen a rise in popularity as of late, especially in the dueling scene. The strength of this comes in two forms, dependent on the build. In my previous theory crafting video, I discussed that some duelers use this for the stun, but I recommend the other effect instead. The damage from this set is comparable to a stronger spammable hitting, and because this is delayed burst, can be lined up with the other skills such as Deep Fissure or Power of the Light. That said, this set doesn't see a lot of use outside dueling and can take a bit of practice to get used to. With this in mind, however, learning to master the set when paired with crit heavy setups can lead to devastating combos, or in the very least, relieve some pressure with a stun. The final monster set for the burst that I'll mention is Molag Hina. This set is widely unpopular by the player base, but I'm putting this one here for its potential use. The set greatly increases your raw spell damage, but also increases the cost of your own abilities. Many players are turned away by the second effect, though I consider opening your mind a bit to this. For example, if I'm using an ultimate that can be activated before Molag Hina, like Corrosive Armor, then activate the set by light attacking twice, as well as Mechanical Acuity, I can achieve 100% penetration, 100% crits, and an additional 560 spell damage as well, leading to lethal amounts of burst rather quickly. Running this set requires adjustments not common outside the typical build, but I wanted to bring this up to players who'd otherwise blow this off as unusable. The list of viable dot-based monster sets is considerably smaller than the burst section. To start, Zaun is a staple across most builds, and especially with players using the Ardent Flame skill line, as the fire damage from this set is greatly increased, and increasing in damage with every tick. If you have methods of slowing an enemy to maintain Zaun on target, this set can be devastating. This set loses effectiveness immediately, however, against opponents who go invisible or streak away, so don't assume this is an obvious choice based solely on the damage tooltip alone. Marsalok is a set used by dot players to add burst into their kit, and grows in strength based on every negative effect. Given the amount of status effects, dots, snares, and more, any dot build running a diverse set of debuffs can easily benefit from this set's maximum potential, and is enhanced when running with players casting other effects on them as well. This set pairs well with Serpent's Disdain to ensure status effects remain active on your target at all times. Both Zaun's and Marsalok synergize well with the Malakath's Ring of Brutality. While I'll go into greater detail into running this mythic during my mythics video, it's important to understand that sets that have a percent symbol in their description cannot crit and receive direct upgrades from running raw damage increases instead. If you're running either of these sets, consider investing in that direction. Geral's, while not offering any direct damage, helps dot players achieve their win condition more easily. Dot builds win by having their damage over time higher than their opponent's healing over time. If this happens, and the dot player can survive, they win. While this set might not do any tangible damage, its effects often far outweigh this fact, and can disallow opponents' healing from doing much at all, leading to their demise. Outside of dot builds, however, I recommend almost every player bring this into Battlegrounds, at least in their inventory. In the current Battleground landscape, healers run without consequence and can clog up games. If you want an immediate answer to this, Geral's is the best set to do this, even if you rely on burst sets like Mechanical Acuity and Balorg. That said, if you plan on using this set, you must also use a dot to pair with this, as while the debuff constantly refreshes while damaging, you'll want a dot to escalate the stacks quicker and maintain the maximum value of stacks as possible, or else the set quickly loses viability. There are only 3 sustain sets in the game, but they each separate in various ways. In solo play, many players have historically chosen to use Engine Guardian as their way of restoring all 3 resources, but another powerful tool from this is actually from the Guardian itself. When the set activates, a Donor Sphere guy spawns and follows you around, and clever players can actually use this as a way of breaking line of sight from their target to them. Because the tab targeting in this game is less than ideal, attackers often wind up throwing their ultimates and stuns into the Engine Guardian rather than you, effectively providing 100% damage mitigation for a small time. Players can interrupt the channeled effects from this, though almost no one does. Roxa is a more modern alternative to this, as it also provides Tri-Stat recovery up to a maximum of 240 each, plus the additional 70 from the One Piece set effect. Players who don't need additional damage from either burst or dot monster sets, especially those running in Cyrodiil, greatly benefit from the effects of this set. Finally, and the only non-typical set in this list is Symphony of Blades. When running any small group scale or group PvP content, having a healer run this set adds a lot of desirable sustain to the group and can immediately be noticed as soon as it activates. While your own Symphony cannot affect yourself, this can be a great boon to your allies. To close out the monster sets, we have the utility options. These are somewhat miscellaneous category that offer bonuses that are run for niche reasons. Bloodspawn is a set usable outside of just being a burst tool, as I mentioned earlier, but can also be synergized with other sets and skills that boost ultimate gain to high amounts. When paired with skills that grant major and minor heroism, as well as the decisive traits on weapons, a build can dump ultimates faster than ever, and Bloodspawn is commonly the set to run that helps this the most. Zol is a set most players don't consider, as stuns already exist within their build. This, however, operates amazingly in small-scale teams in Cyrodiil. Your window of death is often started by being stunned, and this set helps shorten that window greatly, and in fact, buying you more time than you had before you were stunned. The AoE fear from this set relieves pressure for a few seconds to all enemies near you. In Cyrodiil, I've been saved countless times from my allies running this set, and can really turn the fight around easily. For Mighty Chudon, some players pick up skill lines that don't offer resolve. While this is an edge case monster set, classic Sorks used this in the past to free up a skill slot from an otherwise undesirable major resolve skill. If you're wanting to run 3 damage lines, none of which offer resolve, this set might help you fill in those necessary buffs that are covered in my previous theory crafting video. To close out the monster sets, I'll end with Nibide. Nibide is a newer set that I don't see many players run. Anytime you're knocked back or moved in any way, you gain a large damage shield that ignores the battle spirit penalty, and when the shield is not active, you gain a unique 5% damage reduction. To focus on the first part of this statement, you gain heavy resistance and basically immunity to sets such as Dark Convergence, and skills such as Dragonite's Leap. This set maintains its place in this meta as it did the previous patch, and does well in Battlegrounds where sets like Rush of Agony are common. Moving into the 5-piece sets, for the sake of time, I won't go into as much detail with every set, though understanding their general purpose is often more important than knowing what every stat line provides. This section will be separated into raw damage sets, proc damage sets, dot sets, middle ground sets, and defensive sets. Starting with raw damage sets, I'm defining these as sets that are active at all times and increase your damage done rather than having a separate instance of damage. Essence Thief offers a unique 10% damage increase, so this stacks with Major and Minor Berserk as well as the Exploiter passive. If you can acquire the additional sources of damage to pair with this, your hits, even non-critical ones, can devastate your opponent. If you want to avoid fishing for crits or are using Malakath's Band of Brutality, Essence Thief is a great choice. The set is more powerful than that, however, and provides some healing, but also has a lot of stamina regeneration. Even on my Magicka builds, this set was one of my top choices, as breaking free on a Magicka-based build can sometimes be too costly to afford. Order's Wrath is another solid option and can be viewed as a default if you don't know which direction you're going for yet, but still have a lot of crit chance. The critical damage from this set pairs well with named buffs like Major and Minor Force, and given the current shift towards a crit damage meta, more players are picking this up as time goes on. Soul Cleave is a set accessible only to base class Nightblades, and for a reason. The unique 21% damage allows Swallow Soul, Soul Tether, and Sap to hit exceedingly hard and allows the target to heal massively, offering not only a huge damage increase, but also lots of survivability. There is the downside of losing ultimate, however, the passives of the siphoning skill line overcompensate for this deficit, making the cons entirely negligible. Thank you to @baby for showing this one to me in Stormhaven. Next on the list is Oakfathers. What Order's Wrath is to crit damage, Oakfathers is to penetration and spell damage. While not offering any defensive capabilities, players that use an aggressive playstyle to kill their enemy quickly can use this in either a dot or a burst setup. Ola Rime is the final recommended raw damage set. While this technically activates like a proc, Because there's a guaranteed 100% uptime with just a little bit of attention, I'm placing this within the raw damage category. The set was historically used by healers in PvE to greatly boost team damage, but the same principle can be applied to PvP as well. While no longer as popular in solo play, the set still offers high amounts of damage increase that can also be shared with your allies. You will need skills such as Focus Rune that place an ability on the ground to activate this. There are a lot of proc sets in the game and are far too numerous to count for one video. However, I've included 4 that can immediately add to any burst build that requires more damage outside a skill or another similar set. Null Arca, a trial set, was recently buffed as subclassing was released. As it currently stands, this set is comparable to Calurian upon its release, dealing a large burst of damage quickly, which can, of course, crit. If you're turned away by the 3-piece bonus being Minor Slayer, the set's proc damage far offsets this lack of a stat line and can help most players secure kills when they otherwise wouldn't be able to. To maximize the set's effectiveness, invest into critical hit chance and damage. Mechanical Acuity is different from other proc sets. While not offering any separate damage activations, due to the long cooldown of the set, I've placed it under this category. Mechanical Acuity grants the user guaranteed critical strikes for a long time before going back on cooldown. Using this set requires builds to be passive for a long time before unleashing a powerful burst, and pairs well with Bloodspawn, but especially Balorg. Many open world builds utilize these pairings in tandem with a strong defensive set to possess the survivability of a tank with the damage of a bursting Nightblade. If you've grown frustrated with someone being hard to kill but taps you nearly instantly, this combination may be to blame. For Templars using the class as a base, Aetheric Lancer combines your stun and damage on the same tick when using a skill like Piercing Javelin. While also usable with jabs, the placement of the ability can become inconsistent within any moving fight, so while the damage on the activation might be high, I could only reasonably recommend this to range plars. Rush of Agony is the final set within the subcategory and offers a unique form of delayed burst. Builds utilizing a gap close can add a large amount of damage after 2 seconds of landing their ability, making pairings with Deep Fissure especially useful in AoE situations. Historically, this set was used by bombers, though I've personally made great use of this in builds to take many instances of damage simultaneously. This set has a secondary purpose, however, as the pull from the set sometimes ignores crowd control immunity and can act as sort of a double stun in some situations. Almost every build can benefit from this, but to gain the most value from this choice, you must be aware of the 2-second delay in damage to burst more effectively. Pyrebrand, Reliquins, and Vatatrans all effectively operate the same way, with their differences listed on the image on your screen. As mentioned earlier, sets containing a % symbol in their name cannot benefit from critical hits, thus I'd recommend you pair these with Malacaths, but some sets outside of this rule follow suit, such as Reliquins. A typical dot player utilizing the Ardent Flame skill line will use all 3 of these together to drive their opponent into a defensive feedback loop, preventing any outgoing damage from occurring. Snake in the Stars is an answer to the increased cross-healing felt by recent updates. While it offers burst-like acuity, this set excels in small-scale environments like battlegrounds and punishes many healing over time effects on a single target. To make the most of this set, however, you'll want both the files as well. Gerals can also extend the effectiveness of the set by almost completely shutting down incoming heals. Do note that the proc condition can be a bit tricky, and the cooldown is tied to yourself rather than an individual target, so abilities like Caltrops will not set the effect onto every player, but just one. Draugr Grip and Dragon's Appetite function similarly, offering raw damage increases to your abilities, but is clearly most effective on dot builds. These are not identical sets, however, each coming with their own unique effect. Draugr will give you higher damage per hit, but at the cost of your own healing, whereas Dragon's Appetite requires a target to be hemorrhaged to activate, but deals a bit less damage than Draugr. There is another effect from Appetite, offering a small degree of healing when you apply dot damage. While not entirely interchangeable sets, players can view the opportunity cost of running one over the other as a logistical choice that makes sense with their ability lineup. Deadly isn't a set often run within modern day PvP, but some players have made an argument for it. Generally speaking, I'd avoid running Fate Carver, but some people decide that the ability can actually perform quite well under some circumstances. For my own observations, if I see Fate Carver, I anticipate and often actualize a fast kill on a low HP target. If there is a case for this ability and set to be used, please let me know because I am genuinely curious and I'm always looking for ways to expand my knowledge of PvP. Outside of Arcanists, I could see a case for this with Templar running jabs, especially paired with dots to aid its damage. In the case of Opportunity Cost, I'm not sure this would beat out comparable sets like Essence Thief, though I may be mistaken on this. The last dot 5-piece in the set is Serpent's Disdain. The set is unique and gives status effects 4 times the normal duration, turning every status effect into a ticking dot. Burning, Poisoned, and Hemorrhaging, for example, each apply a 4-second dot, but with this set, these become 16-second dots, effectively making each of these into an ability of its own. This set requires heavy investment into many damage types and is best used on dual wield with Poison and Disease enchantments, as well as Blood for Blood or other abilities that apply a Hemorrhaging. Skills like Elemental Susceptibility can apply all of your elemental status effects as well. The set also makes cleansing from Templar and Warden less reliable, as the more status effects on a target, the more instances of cleansing are required in order to be fully purged. Moving on to the Middleground sets, I've brought this setup many times, but haven't fully gone into detail with its effect set, and that set is Rallying Cry. The set effect is twofold, one part providing a unique 300 weapon and spell damage, boosting your offensive and defensive capabilities, but most importantly, providing a 1600 critical resistance. For those unaware, every 66 points of critical resistance grants a 1% critical damage reduction. So from this set, we're gathering a 24% critical mitigation value. Activating the set is relatively easy, though you can make this uptime higher by incorporating more than one healing over time ability on the back bar. For builds mostly on the front bar, you may have to consciously swap to this, but most players don't feel the need to pay any attention to this timer. The set is useful in groups as well, though it loses a hair of its effectiveness per player. In group settings, coordinate with your team to decide who will run this and who can run other sets, such as Olorime. By doing this, you're effectively adding another 5-piece set to their kit. In the context of the current meta, this set is invaluable, and there's a good reason almost every video on YouTube includes this as a backbar set. Most people are under the assumption that this set is a requirement for all generalist builds, and until today, I came to that same conclusion. A user by the name of Wheat found me in Stormhaven and discussed a potential alternative, or counter to the Rallying Cry meta that we see today. He suggested Farstrider, a set overlooked by most players, including myself. The set essentially steals the critical resistance from the enemy, providing yourself an offensive and defensive advantage. Mathematically speaking, an opponent using Rallying Cry with no allies nearly loses 20% of their critical resistance while providing you the same value, giving you a large advantage over your opponent. As to testing this in the field myself, I cannot speak to its effective use, though the numbers are pointing towards a favorable outcome for this. If you're willing to try this out, please do and let me know. This isn't some YouTuber bit of getting comments. I legitimately want to know if players find that the set performs well. Activating the set requires a gap close, but this can easily be worked into by most builds with an adjustment or so. Running the set could potentially allow players to run another set on the back bar while maintaining a degree of that critical resistance from using the set. The last section of the 5-piece sets includes sets that were once popular but died off over the years. It's important to remember these sets as they may be relevant as the popular loadouts change and lean one way or another. I've discussed these two sets in a previous video, but Mara's Bomb and Word Tree are strong ways to get rid of debuffs off yourself. While they can provide a cleanse, they do so separately and carry their own strengths. Starting with Mara's Bomb, this set indicates a successful cleanse yields health back, as well as providing a larger cleanse every so often. For anyone running the Animal Companion skill line, we can use this set to the maximum effect by spamming Netch as it continually cleanses as active, as well as healing when an Animal Companion's ability finishes. While not an incredibly potent means to outpace incoming pressure, using this as a tool to gather respite while LOSing in an open world fight can ensure higher resources when you'll need them later. Word Tree is quite different, though it may appear similarly at first. Every 15 seconds, all debuffs are removed, and this includes your own Girals. While this can take some time to get used to and its effects, removing every debuff at once has great value in every PvP environment, but especially against opponents using any of their aforementioned dot setups. I couldn't recommend this as a staple set worth staying in for a static build, though having this in your inventory in a Battlegrounds match could be helpful if another team member is already supplying Rallying Cry or a Lorime. Robes of the Hist and other sets that apply heals are unfortunately less viable in this patch. Without spiraling into a larger discussion about heals per second becoming less valuable than effective maximum hit points, I may make a video covering that topic in the future. Essentially, because the easiest way to kill your opponent right now is by huge amounts of burst, healing over time is not nearly as potent as it once was. In future patches, if the time to kill increases, sets such as this will once again see a prevalent position. As for any of the sets not mentioned, I'm sure there are cases for almost every set in the game in some regard, but they're not practical in most builds, so I didn't include them. If there are some obvious ones you think I'm overlooking, please let me know. I'm almost always in Stormhaven, so if you have any suggestions, stop by or say hello. Thanks for watching, and make sure you have a balanced meal.